Now, the High Court in Johannesburg has granted Clover an interdict over striking unions. The interdict aims to denounce any form of intimidation and violence against non-striking workers and third parties. Let's discuss the latest from the Clover strike with the spokesperson of the company, Velthyusen. Stephen, good afternoon. First off, one would say the company is pleased with the interdict, but it's the second time you've got an interdict. Are you sure this time it will work?
Dan, yes, only time will tell. Look, as you know, the strike's been ongoing since November last year, and we've seen the efforts of the unions and its members, its strike efforts escalating to a situation where we have this intimidation, violence, and which ultimately led to the death of a security guard on the weekend, which was unfortunate. So we didn't have any other option but to take the necessary action and approach the court to come to our assistance. We've also upped our security efforts and all efforts to ensure that we protect our workers, our customers, and the general public.
So what is the company going to do now that you've got that interdict to ensure that it is being respected?
Well, like I said, we've increased our efforts to ensure that we can continue to supply the market. We protect our customers and the general public. We'll be monitoring closely the actions of the unions and its members. And should they find themselves in contempt of those orders, we'll do the necessary to ensure that they are prosecuted.
Okay. Yesterday afternoon, you spoke to us here at eNCA, Stephen. We were talking about the talks that were going to be held today, that were going to be facilitated by Mr. Lionel October on behalf of the Department of Economy and Trade. Where are the talks at as we speak now?
Yes, Dan, we've commenced the talks again this morning at 9. We've been at it the whole day. We've again made a concise effort to come to the table with our proposal to make sure that all parties understand where we are and where we came from, and that we've made significant strides to come to a resolution. Unfortunately, with these type of talks, there needs to be a two-way dialogue, and it seems to me that we've got an impasse on some of the issues. We've also seen that at today's meetings that the unions invited other parties and also Mr. Vavi to attend to these meetings. And unfortunately, we are not prepared to politicize this whole conversation. It's a wage and a retrenchment dispute, and that's our main concern and where we want to get a resolution.
Yeah, I have Mr. Vavi as well joining us now on the line. Good afternoon, Mr. Vavi. Of course, he's the leader of the South African Federation of Trade Unions. Mr. Vavi, you joined these discussions today, having been, I guess, invited by the unions that are there, like FAU and GUSA. What is your sense of the talk so far, Mr. Vavi? Mr. Velthyusen saying that there is progress, but there are also some sticking points.
Well, it's difficult to articulate where things are going to when you are right in the middle of an attempt to cobble together something that can provide some pathway that will take the discussion forward. We are right at that sensitive part now where the facilitator has put some propositions on the table, which if the company was to accept them, then we would be able to move forward on that basis. But we are right at the point now where there's still a flowing and towing on exactly that package the facilitator, Mr. October, have put on the table. So we are unable to give you a precise answer as to whether we are making progress or not. And because it depends on whether the proposition of the chairperson is accepted by both of the parties.
Now, understandably so, you're right in the middle of it, and Mr. Velthyusen saying the same thing. It's still early on, but should we as a public, looking at this Clover strike and understanding these talks going on now, be getting the impression that it will be resolved?
All wars end up at the negotiating table. We've been in the game of fighting in the streets and ending up signing an agreement at the table. But we have made it very clear throughout that what you have not won in the streets, you will not win in the negotiating room and at the negotiating table. So we know the relationship between the two, and that's why we want to make a call to all staff, to all members of the working class, to say you have to intensify the solidarity with the Clover workers. You have to intensify the strike. You have to intensify the boycott of all of its products. Only when that becomes effective will we guarantee a movement forward at the negotiating table. And that's exactly where we are. The interdict that the company is jumping up and down about is not a victory at all. SAFTU, Giwusa, FAO, all of us agree that intimidation and breaking down, destroying of the property of any company can never be in the interest of any strike, because those activities divert attention away from the genuine demands workers are advancing in the streets and in the strike. And suddenly we're talking about intimidation and violence instead of talking about the brutality the company is meting out against its workers that have been loyal to it for so long. What the company got is an interdict against violence. We agree there shouldn't be a violence. What the company got is an interdict against the people who may be wanting to break the property, and we agree with that. In fact, the union have written a letter to its members to saying, please, the strike must be peaceful, must be conducted within the spirit of the law. No one must be forced. No one must be intimidated. No one must break down any property of the company. But the strike is not interdicted. The pickets that are ongoing are not interdicted, despite the spirited attempt by the company to interdict and to end the strike. The strike have not ended. The strike is continuing.
There you have Mr. Velthyusen. You're hearing Mr. Vavi there saying they support the interdict against violence, against intimidation. In fact, there's a letter that's been written. That should be comforting. But you are still going back to the negotiating table. The strike has been going on since November. And as you said, it takes two to tango. From your sense, Mr. Velthyusen, is the company willing to make some compromises here? Are they coming through, even at the sensitive stage that Mr. Vavi has just described for us?
Yes, Dan, thank you. It's comforting to hear those words from Mr. Vavi, and very ironic that a week ago he called upon his members to occupy our factory. So I'm happy for him to retract that comment and then move forward. Moving on to the negotiations, I believe that we've exemplified the attitude to come with concrete proposals for the unions to consider. It's now up to the unions to also meet us halfway, and hopefully then at the end we'll have a solution.
Yeah, we'll have to wait and see how that happens, because as Mr. Vavi, I won't be able to get any other information, I guess, in terms of where the sticking points are. Mr. Vavi, yesterday when I interviewed Mr. Velthyusen, he made it very clear that there were two big issues around about job losses and salary reduction, and that the company did not want to entertain any discussion around the Israeli shareholder matter. What is the view of the unions, Mr. Vavi, as we conclude?
There's no way. By the way, we are still calling on workers to occupy any Clover factory and to demand that government intervene and that the company comply with the directives of the Competition
But
Commission.
won't that call, sorry, Mr. Vavi, won't that ongoing call to occupy property cause intimidation opportunities? Aren't you concerned about that?
They are not at all. There are sit-ins in South Africa as we speak, left, right, and center, in company boardrooms. They have never, as long as you keep it peaceful, as long as you do not break tables, you do not break anything. If you occupy your stage, a sit-in, that's not violence, that's a sit-in. I think that gentleman knows what is the truth. Yeah, but the point that we're making is this. We will not agree on a 20% wage cut, never, over our dead bodies. We will not agree that the company slaughter 2,000 jobs, nor are we going to agree on the company to close down all of the inland factories so that it can warehouse this country and hollow out its industrial and manufacturing capacity. We suspect that because it wants to bring in finished products from the occupied territories of the Palestine. We are putting very firmly the issue of disinvestment of Bilco from South Africa because we believe all of the trouble that started at Clover was brought by that investment from that apartheid state of Israel. And despite the fact that the ANC have been telling us over and over that it stands in solidarity with the people of Palestine, but it is allowing the companies of Israel to hollow out our manufacturing capacity and to close down factories left, right, and center. It's nowhere to be found as we speak to deal with the consequences of their betrayal.
It sounds like it's going to be, it's a big sticking point. Yeah, it sounds like it's a big sticking point. Mr. Velthyusen, last word to you. Yesterday when I brought it up, you said you're not going to entertain discussing shareholder matters. You are hearing Mr. Vavi saying there is no way that is not an issue that's being discussed or should be discussed at the table. Your concluding words there, Mr. Velthyusen, before you return to the negotiations?
Dennis, unfortunately, we're going to mingle politics with the real issues at hand, and the poor striking worker is the one that will bear the brunt. You can't mingle facts with fiction, and unfortunately, we can't entertain these allegations, which are obviously untrue. We hope that sanity will prevail, and then we'll have a meaningful dialogue on the real issues at hand.
Are you saying that the measure or the investment by the Israeli company did not lead to the nearly 2,000 job losses, did not lead for you as Clover to shut down these companies, that it was always a plan even before that investment was made? Mr. Velthyusen?
Well, we've been very clear about the project that we undertook when we started the relocation of factories. The DTI acknowledged that they are aware of these discussions that have been taking place as far back as 2012, 2013. And then this was discussed at length at the Competition Commission with the unions in attendance at the time, and also gave their input. So to now claim that the Israelis are responsible for the relocation of factories is we're dumbfounded and we have to question why this is now being brought into a wage and a retrenchment dispute.
Yeah, but the trade unions have been very clear. They're not happy with that investment, as explained as well now by Mr. Vavi. And earlier on, we did speak to Giusa and FAO as well as we are tracking that story. Gentlemen, thank you very much for your time for now. We're getting a sense of where the sticking points are. Well, good luck. That's all I can say to the continuation of the negotiations. And I must tell you, the country is watching to see how this all ends up. The Clover strike having started in November. Thank you very much, Zwelinzima Vavi of SAFTU and Stephen Velthyusen. He's, of course, spokesperson for Clover.